I'm from the University of South Africa, based in South Africa, and I'm going to present my study based on the title, Open Government Data to Support for Awareness of Employment Opportunities Among the Youth in Alexandra Township in Gauteng Province in South Africa. And the co-authors of this study include Mrs. Ronell, Dr. Samuel, and Professor Judy. So we're going to start by looking at the background of this study. So we'll start by saying, like, every country, both rich and poor, creating adequate employment opportunities among the youth is a major challenge facing them. And in Africa, as they say, and as we have seen it with one of the papers that we've read through, is that is the fastest growing in terms of population in the world, and the biggest percentage of the population is it's youthful. So if we look now like into South Africa, is that in the year 2020, in the first quarter, unemployment rate was increased to 30.1%. And this does not include the jobs that could have been caused by the effects of the pandemic of the COVID-19, and which it started in last year, March, and we can see how it has extended till now. That's why we cannot meet face to face. And in terms of youth unemployment in South Africa, we see there has been a significant growth by 1% from 14.7 in 2019 to 41.1% in the first quarter of 2020. This information is retrieved from the Statistics SA South Africa, which is a government entity that does those analysis. And in a paper that was written by Claude in 2015, it describes the situation of youth unemployment in South Africa as a thief of hope. And if we read and see some of the factors that have contributed to these factors, we could say, although some are not here, like example number one, the economic growth. We see the country economy is not growing at the rate that it's expected to grow. We have seen that there's a decline in growth, and then there's the population increase, whereby we have like the population is growing at a higher pace compared to the economic growth, and then that's increasing the number of decreasing the number of employment opportunities. And then we also have, like as we can see on the screen, the shortage of skills and the youth not knowing where to acquire information, which is one of the we'll be looking at in terms of like how can they use now open government data to access some of this information on employment opportunities. And also as discussed earlier on, is that COVID-19 has also exacerbated this problem of employment opportunities in South Africa also. Now we're just going to look for our research question for this study. And the research question for this study is, how can access to open government data support employment opportunities for the youth in a township in Gauteng province? The research objective for this study is to identify the youth awareness of OGD support to awareness and employment opportunities. And as we saw, like most of the youth do not have information or where to acquire information. And this study is trying to see through OGD if it can improve the awareness in supporting their employment opportunities. And then we're going to look like the theoretical lens for this study. The theoretical lens for this study is a choice framework. Choice framework focuses extensively on addressing social structures, individual agencies, and the degree of choice, which is also referred as dimension of choice, and the outcome. And choice framework is normally read backward. As you can see, it starts from the development outcomes, then to structures and agency, and then we see, is there a dimension of choice that is able to analyze how the awareness of outcome was reached. So, and this is how also we're going to look at it. But this will be discussed extensively when you are analyzing and the results and findings of this study, as this will be used all through the study in terms of how the questions will be framed and how the data will be analyzed. in this study. And then we'll dive into the research approach and the methodology. The study was guided by interpretism, and in terms of interpretism, we have the ontology side of it, and we have the subjectivism of the epistemology type of it. On the relativity ontology side of it is that reality will differ from person to person. So and this will be like when we ask a question to the same question to two different participants, we expect like the reality to answering that question will differ from participant 1 to participant 2. And when it comes to the epistemology, subjective is the perception of the researcher. And what this it means, like, to eliminate the research biasness, the study we used the research assistants who helped us who helped in assisting in collecting of data so that we can take away the research biasness. And then the case study was conducted in Alexandra Township, and we used semi-structured interviews to collect the data. And in terms of the research strategy, we used purposeful and snowballing. Purposeful was used in this study when we selected the research assistants, and the research assistants were familiar in the area. They understood the language and the different lingo spoken in the community. So they helped us to identify the participants through snowballing. And then after that, when we got the participants through purposeful, some accepted to be part of the interview and some declined. And since you volunteered to be a participant, so those who volunteered, we interviewed them, and then we asked them like if they can refer to some of their colleagues whom they know they not working at the moment, or they're unemployed and they're at a useful stage, and they referred to us up to some of their friends and family members who are not working. And that's how snowballing was achieved in this study. And then in terms of the analysis of the data, we used thematic analysis to analyze the data. And so just to give a brief overview of how the data was analyzed. So this is just a tabular format of how we got our data. And as you can see, the frequency, which is the total number of participants, we interviewed 34 participants. And in that 34 participants, the criteria we used is that, number 1, you had to stay in Alexandra Township, and number 2, you were not employed at the time of the interview, and number 3, you are between of the age of 18 to 35. So if we look, the male we interviewed 15, and the female we had 19. In terms of race, the area is predominantly black. So we had 33 black participants and 1 colored. In terms of the age group, as you can see, we had 18 to 24, we had 17 participants, 25 to 29, 14 participants, and then 3 from between the ages of 30 to 34. And in terms of the education level, we had like the ones who did not have matric. Matric is basically the high school level in South Africa. Those who did not have a high school certificate were 9 of them, and those with a high school certificate were 14. And then certificate there we had 7, and 3 from a diploma. We did not have any participant who had a degree or a postgraduate degree, and 1 participant preferred not to say so, and we respected that decision. In terms of ICT ownership or having access to it, so the participants we interviewed, 28 of them had mobile devices which they would use to access the internet and do 1 or 2, 3 things. And then we had like 6 of them who had both a mobile device and a laptop. And then we had like 2 who had a desktop computer and a mobile devices. In terms of printer and scanner, all of them had an access to the internet and internet or cyber cafe. They would scan their and printers, and all of them, they would access the internet through the cyber cafe. So those are some of the services that they were being used in the internet cafe. And then in terms of like now the results and the findings, as we discussed earlier, when we were looking for these results. As we say, like the development outcome was improved access to OGD, and like we say that we read from backwards, where we'll have the development of outcome, and then we have the structures and the agencies. So if you look how we got to improved access, like we look like in terms of the structure, we looked at institution and organization. So in terms of the institution and organization, we looked how well the participant understood the institution and organization that the government offers like this. And an example is like the knowledge of SETA. Most participants did not know what SETA is, and SETA basically in full is the Sectoral Education and Training Authorities. This organization provide short skills that the government is in need for, and sometimes even while you are doing the courses, the government give you a stipend, like a stipend or an allowance for when you are doing those courses, to encourage more students to come and take courses. It's a skill that the country is looking. And there's also National Skills Authority. And then we have access to ICT. And in access to ICT, we have 3 subtitles in it, as you can see in the bracket. We had availability, skills for ICT, and affordability. In terms of availability, we saw like the participant had mobile phones, had a laptop, they had access to the internet cafe, but they were struggling with affordability. So there was the cost of data, there was the cost of using the internet cafe, the cost of printing, scanning, and all that. And some of them even could not afford the device. So that's one of the affordability issues, and that's how it came in. And they gave also suggestion of how the government can chip in, or other community members. And then we have skills of ICT, where some of them did not have adequate skills to perform some of the things. And then we have like the agency. So in terms of like the agency, as you can see here, we just have like we only have the initials, but you can see here on the key what we have. And I'll give you an example. We have like the MR, which is material resource. So material resource, we can see the participant had laptops, some of them had devices, and they had access to the internet cafe. Although some of them also suggested like community support can come in through by providing some of these facilities, like maybe having the government coming through by having a center where they can just go and access computers, etc., at a fair cost. And then we had financial resource. As you can see there, FR is a financial resource. So with financial resource, like we could see, like some of them could not afford some of the services because they were not working, and they were relying finances through either partner or family members. And then there are also others who got grant money from since they had a child or children. That's how they access money. So technically, this just summarizes how it was used. And then we also had a social resource, where information was received from friends and friends. And then we had also information resource. In terms of information resource, it was accessed through either the internet and technology, and the social networks, or through the word of mouth, where friends will give information through the word of mouth. And then did we have a dimension of choice? Yes, we did have a dimension of choice. We had the use of OGD and social contact. The use of OGD, we can say that some of the participants, when they were using, like when we were chatting to them or like interviewing them, they say like, yes, we normally follow on Facebook. They were getting information through social media, whereby they say like, so we would follow Instagram pages for the government entities or government departments through Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And then sometimes they will post something and they will click the link, and the process of clicking that link and accessing that information. So basically that's access to OGD. So most of the participants were using OGD, but they did not know what we are doing, what we are using is OGD. So we improve their access to knowledge by saying like, oh, so that website that you click, that's an open government data. It's a government link that will give you access to government data. And also in the process, we improve their access to OGD through the dimensions of use of OGD by giving them information and links about institutions and organizations that government provides. And some of them also in the process, they went through, and in the follow-up question, they will say like, oh, I actually clicked that and I saw, and we give them the link also for the government website where the skills that are required by the country are needed. And then finally, we look at the contribution of this study. This study has given a practical contribution. At the same time, it has given a theoretical contribution. In terms of the theoretical contribution, this study, it has given the challenges relating to access OGD to support awareness on employment opportunities. So in relating to access, so we realize that most of the people, like the challenges that were relating to access is, number one, they did not have information. And part of that information is that they were using OGD, which they did not know they were using about, number one. And then number two, by giving them the link on some of the government institution, is that it was a challenge to them since they did not know, but we have improved their access to OGD awareness and in terms of employment opportunities. And also they gave a couple of suggestions on how like they would want the information to the government, the recommendation on how open on the awareness of on their challenges that they are getting in terms of accessing the open government data. And then in terms of the theoretical contribution is like, there's that application of choice framework is to understand the use of awareness in supporting employers. So choice framework has only been used in ICT, but now for the first time it's being used on OGD. So this one is like one way of looking like, okay, it has improved, like the theoretical contribution is like, it's being the first time it has been applied, and at least more study can be done using choice framework in terms of OGD in the future. In terms of the limitation, the study was only conducted in one township, and it only focused on OGD in terms on employment opportunities, and which that study can be done also in other areas as an OGD as a whole. And with that, I would like to say thank you, and also just to give an acknowledgement and a big thank you to the South African Research Chair Initiative of the Department of Science and Technology and National Research Foundation of South Africa for sponsoring this study and my study with the grant number 98564. Thank you, and if there's any question and answer, I'll be more than willing to answer. Thank you so much.